Hello, everybody. Taking another little poetry break here on the last day of school. I don't have any students in my room. I'm only a few final projects shy of sending that email to the registrar saying my grades are finished and so begins my summer. Almost there. But I wanted to take a little break and read a poem. The poet is Oliver de la Paz. Oliver, several years ago now, was kind enough to pick a poem of mine for a poetry prize for a contest put on by River Styx, the literary journal there. He picked my poem and had some really nice things to say about it, which was such a surreal moment to see a poet whom you admire take the time to read your work and write a few sentences in praise of it when they don't know you from Adam. And Oliver still doesn't know me. But in any case, I forever have been grateful for him pulling my poem out of a batch of really good poems that was submitted to them. So, in any case, I've always been a fan of his work, and even more so after having that connection with him. I want to read to you my personal favorite poem of his. It comes from his book Requiem for the Orchard. The poem is called In Defense of Small Towns. In defense of small towns. When I look at it, it's simple, really. I hated life there. September, once filled with animal deaths and toughened hay, and the smells of fall were boiled down beets and potatoes, or the farm hands' breeches smeared with oil and diesel as they rode into town, dusty and pissed. The radio station split time between Metal and Tejano, and the only action happened on Friday nights, where the high school football team gave everyone a chance at forgiveness. The town left no room for novelty or change. The sheriff knew everyone's son, and despite that, we'd cruise up and down the avenues, switching between brake and gear shift. We'd fight and spit chew into big gulp cups and have our hearts broken nightly. In that town, I learned to fire a shotgun at 9 and wring a chicken's neck with one hand by twirling the bird and whipping it straight like a towel. But I loved the place once. Everything was blonde and cracked, and the irrigation ditches stretched to the end of the earth. You could ride on a bicycle and see clearly the outline of every leaf, or catch on the street each word of a neighbor's argument. Nothing could happen there, and if I willed it, the place would have me slipping over its rocks into the river with the sugar plant's steam, or signing papers at a storefront army desk, buttoned up with medallions and a crew cut, eyeing the next recruits. If I've learned anything, it's that I could be anywhere, staring at a hunk of asphalt or listening to the clap of billiard balls against each other in a bar and hear my name. Indifference now? Some. I shook loose, but that isn't the whole story. The fact is, I'm still in love. And when I wake up, I watch my son yawn, and my mind turns his upswept hair into corn stalks at the edge of a field. Stillness is an acre, and his body idles deep like heavy machinery, I want to take him back there to the small town of my youth and hold the book of wildflowers open for him and look. I want him to know the colors of horses, to run with a cattail in his hand and watch as its seeds fly weightless, as though nothing mattered, as though the little things we tell ourselves about our pasts stay there, rising slightly and just out of reach. In Defense of Small Towns, from the book Requiem for the Orchard, a fantastic poem and a fantastic book by a fantastic poet. I read that poem and it always takes me back to my hometown. It takes me back to rural LaSalle Parish, where I grew up in Louisiana, in a town, in a community that lived outside of a small town, actually. The small town itself was, I think, 1,100 people at the time, and I lived in a community outside of that town where it was even, if at all possible, more rural. We had a festival there, I remember, called Howdy Neighbor Day in the fall. It was usually coincided with hunting season. I remember as a kid, the people who would go deer hunting there, the first deer that they would shoot in the season, I remember them strapping the deers to the hood of their trucks and driving them through town, so proud of what they had shot. And they would go and process the deers themselves, making deer steaks, grinding the meat themselves into ground meat. All of the deer put up in their freezers and stored, and would feed their families with that. I just remember them driving around with those dead deer on their truck hoods and just how macabre it all was. I remember being with my dad and walking through the woods and asking him over and over, what is that tree? He would say, a hickory. What is that tree? That's a white oak. What's this tree? We'd be in a creek bottom and he'd look up and say, that's a birch, that's a beech. Or we'd be in the thicket and he'd say, that's a pine tree, son. They're all pine trees here. I just remember just loving the names of trees, loving the names of flowers. And we all rode horses back home, and loving the colors of horses, the language of the colors, the Appaloosas and the chestnuts and the roans. It was just all so beautiful. The blazed snouts and the star foreheads. In a lot of ways, I don't want my kids growing up in that small town, but I also know that there are things that they miss by not raising them there. I live in a small town now, but it's 15 to 20 minutes outside of Orlando, Florida. So we get the small town vibe here in Montverde, but certainly with all of the big city amenities just being a short drive away, it's nothing like it was where I grew up in Louisiana. And I take my kids back when I see my parents and my family that live back home, and I show them the old haunts, and I know that they'll never have a connection to it like I had, but it is an interesting phenomenon, I think, that all of us parents have, who have grown up and moved away and sometimes come back and have the task of raising our kids somewhere else. So anyways, a fantastic poet, a fantastic poem, a poet that I'll certainly forever be grateful for. So in any case, goodbye everyone. Have a great day.